What's up, Sneeples? This weekend I will be at the Dallas Calling playing CC, and what hero am I going to be taking this time? It is Azalea, as you probably saw from the thumbnail. I already played Lexi back in the Pro Tour 2, which was a pretty similar meta, just add Oldham. Then at Nats I played Icelander, which is basically the same meta we're looking at today. I just want to do a new hero. I love Icelander still. I still think that's not a bad pick, but Lexi's clearly going to be the dominant force there, so I'm jumping on the Azalea bandwagon, getting in some reps with her, and enjoying it, having a lot of fun. So let's get into that deck tech. Alright, let's get into it. So as mentioned before, here is Azalea. This is the hero I will be taking. I am jumping on the bandwagon, that's right. But I actually have been playing Azalea since last Pro Tour season, and just made the switch to Lexi at the very end there. So I quite enjoy playing Azalea. I know how to play with Azalea, and so I'm excited to finally be playing Azalea. So let's get into it. Definitely using her action here, doing the once per turn deal, where taking the arsenal, putting it on the bottom, taking the top card, putting it in the arsenal. If it's an arrow, has dominate. Trying to get that going just about every turn. That's the idea. That's the goal with Azalea, and that's what the whole deck's going to be built around. So let's get into it. Definitely running Death Dealer. There is the Sand Scour Great Bow builds out there. I have not perfected that build. I do just prefer the Death Dealer. Being able to draw a card based on just paying one is just super good. I like it. Crow's Nest is a super good, important addition to Azalea, allowing a way to add aim counters onto the cards that are being put into the arsenal from the deck, which definitely come up with a few cards, as we'll find out later. Skullbone Cross Wraps. This is just a needed card in order to constantly be able to opt your arsenal that you have face down, turning it face up, opting to see if it's air on top. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want to do. And it has a little bit of arcane barrier, so you take that as well. Field of Spring Tunic. This just allows us to shoot those arrows that cost 1. It also maybe allows us to play an extra pump out, since I don't have to pay with the pump. Instead, I can just pay with the resource here. So Tunic is good. Tunic is necessary, I would say. Bracers of Belief. This is the replacement for your Bullseye Bracers, but it actually works out fairly well with Azalea. You look at the top card of your deck. If it's a red card, then you get +2. If it's a yellow card, you get +1. A blue card, you get 0. But what's really cool about this is that you look at the top card of your deck. So it's a way to see if the top card is an arrow or not. And then if it is an arrow, then you can make that switch. So that's what's really cool about it. So Bracers of Belief actually works pretty well with the Azalea. Next is Snapdragon Scalers. This is to allow for a little bit of a go wide turn. Azalea is definitely more of a go tall ranger, but having a Snapdragon Scalers allows for an extra arrow to be shot, or maybe a Codex of Frailty to be played. And we have Perch Grapplers. This I'm bringing in against decks where I might actually need to block. Mostly thinking of Bravo here. If it means preventing a crush, this is very good. As well as in the mirror, if this means I can play this or block with this and an arrow from hand to stop a Retina Ledger, that's what I want to do. So that's what we bring in Perch Grapplers for. Let's get into the deck itself. So first I want to start off with the cards that help me do Azalea's ability to the fullest, and that is the Ravenous Rabbles here. This really helps with looking at the top card of our deck to determine if it is a arrow on top or not. This just allows us to come in with an attack, as well as doing what we want to do with Azalea, and to making it possible for our arrow to be dominated by knowing it's an arrow on top. We're not doing it blind Azalea. So yeah, Ravenous Rabble, very good for that. It's also good against Dromai to come in and maybe kill like a Mirror Guy or a Chromai, and then shoot an arrow at the opponent. Next up, we have Read the Glide Path. Again, here we're opting, and that's what we like. We like to see the top card of our deck. We like to ensure that it's an arrow. This is also just a pump, and it costs 0, and it So it's a 0 for 3 that opts, which is perfect. This is exactly what we want with Azalea. So read the glide path, very, very good. Maybe not so good, but still good is Scout the Periphery. This is somewhat like read the glide path. It is a 0 for 3 pump, and that lets us look at the top card of target hero's deck. Most of the time that's going to be us to see if that top card's an arrow, but maybe if we already know the top card, we can look at our opponent, which sometimes is pretty relevant to see what is coming. So this is just another way to ensure that you have an arrow on top. However, on this one we cannot actually opt. We have to just keep the card there, unfortunately. Alright, this is a little bit spicy, but it's not unheard of when playing Azalea. The Eye of Ophidia, this is definitely, again, opting to. This is allowing us to make sure that we have an arrow on top. But I particularly like this card when I'm using it to pay for Death Dealer, because Death Dealer does cost 1. I will pitch this to pay for it, and then I can see two things. I can see what card I'm going to draw off Death Dealer and what card's going to be on top. So if I have like a pump and an arrow on top of my deck when I'm opting, I can have the pump be the card to be drawn and the arrow to stay on top, which is exactly what you want. So Eye of Ophidia, I found, has worked more times than not. It is a non-arrow card and can, be a little risky, but I love gems, and if I can find an excuse to play a gem, I'm going to. Now we have an arrow that helps look at the top card of our deck, and that is Spire Sniping. Spire Sniping is very good because whenever it gets loaded in or flipped up, we get to look at the top 2 cards of our deck. We don't get to opt. We can't put either of them on the bottom, but we can put them in whatever order that fits what we're trying to do. So we can make sure that it will be an arrow on top that we can switch into. Spire Sniping, we're only running the blues, as that's really the only one we need, and it's just a good card for that reason. Now that is all the ways we have to look at the top card of our deck to make sure it's an arrow, to use Azalea's ability to get that dominated arrow. Now we're going to look at ways to bring our arrows back, or bring our arrows to the game. And the first one is Codex of Frailty. So Codex of Frailty, we all know this card at this point, but we're definitely using this card in Azalea to bring back a needed arrow that has very good on hit. The prime example of this is Red in the Ledger. Red in the Ledger is such a great arrow. We will look at that here coming up. And if we are playing this to bring it back from the graveyard to play it, then we are playing 6 Red in the Ledgers, and that can just be the game, basically. If 6 Red in the Ledger arrows get shot, then your opponent just might not ever get a true turn, and that's very good as an Azalea player. So Codex Frailty, super good card. Next up is Memorial Ground. Another way for good recursion here. This allows us to put our arrows from our graveyard on top of our deck, which is exactly what we want to do with Azalea, as we can then use her ability to switch into that arrow with Dominate. So Memorial Ground works very good as recursion because it enables the Dominate to happen, and again, it just adds more copies of an arrow that your opponent might not want to see. So essentially with Memorial Ground and Codex of Frailty, we can have 9 copy of one arrow. Next up, we have a tutor card. This is Knock the Death Whistle. This is a great card to tutor, because it tutors and it allows us to not only find the arrow, but it allows us to put the arrow on top of the deck, which again is exactly what we want to do with Azalea, so that we can use her ability to switch it with our arsenal and give the arrow Dominate. So not only does it search, but it sets up for the Dominate, which is exactly what we want. Very good card, Knock the Death Whistle. Okay, those have been our opting cards and our cards that can either find the arrows or recur the arrows. Let's get into the arrows themselves. Alright, first off we have Bolt and Shot. Bolt and Shot, obviously a very good arrow, very well known at this point. Just having that reload potential, as there is tons of pumps in this deck, so more than likely we'll have the go again, we'll have the reload on hit ability. But it's one of the few ways that Azalea can actually go a little bit wide here, allowing us to shoot multiple arrows a turn, and that's not bad, especially when paired with a rain razor. So we really do like bolt and shot. We are running all 9 bolt and shots here. We have 3 reds, 3 yellows, and then of course 3 blues. So running all 9 bolt and shots to just because it's just too good of a card not to. Next up, we have Drill Shot. So Drill Shot is a pretty damn good arrow when it comes to decks that want to block you a lot, that have a good amount of armor, particularly Bravo. I really like Drill Shot into Bravo because it almost kind of forces them to block with their equipment, and you're gonna have to get past that equipment at some point, so you might as well make it sooner than later, and Drill Shot does just that. It also has the aim counter ability to make it a little harder for the equipment to be blocked. Again, we can use our Crow's Nest in order to put that aim counter on, as long as it comes from the top of our deck, which is, you know, as we've seen so far, what we are looking to do with every arrow. It won't happen with every arrow, but it'll happen most times, I would say. Yeah, Drill Shot coming in to put -1 counters on our opponent's equipment. Exactly what we need in order to get through. Next up, we have a 1-of Searing Shot. This is a 1-of because it doesn't have such a good on hit that I want 3 of. The on hit here is they just lose additional life, so it's basically a 0 for 5, which is good value, absolutely, but it's not quite what I need out of on hits. I want on hits that will allow me to shoot another arrow or prevent my opponent from having a good turn, and this just does just a little bit of chip damage. However, we still play the 1-of, and the reason is because it could be a great Codex of Frailty target, or even a great Memorial Ground target, because it does cost 0. So if we don't have the resources to come in with another arrow, this is actually a good arrow to come in with that is free, especially if they're already out of equipment. Then this one becomes super relevant, and just almost could even force a block to happen. So that's ideal. Next up, we have Infecting Shot, which does have the on hit of dealing just more damage with the Blood Rot Pock token. But this is a couple damage, right? This one was only 1 additional damage. This is 2 additional damage. And so because of that, we'll take it. It is a 1 for 5 that blocks for 3, but on hit can be a 1 for 7 sort of situation. So Infecting Shot does allow additional damage to go through. On top of that, if it does get an aim counter, it gets +1, so it could even give itself a buff if we're able to put it on top of the deck. So Infecting Shot we have as a 3-of in red, and then I have 2 in blue. I discard just a solid blue arrow that if it's on top of the deck, it's not the worst thing to switch into with Azalea, because it still has a relevant on hit, and especially with a few pumps can become something deadly. So I like the blue Infecting Shot just as well, just running the 2 though. Alright, next up we have the not the namesake of the deck perhaps, but definitely the icon of the deck, Red in the Ledger. This is the arrow to be feared by aggro players, because this on hit ability to make it where they can only do one thing, you only get 1 action point, no more, no less, makes it where aggro decks slow down. If they're only able to do one thing, particularly with Lexi or even Fi or Katsu, then they're not going to be able to play the game plan that they want to play. And so Red and Ledger is super, super good for that. It allows us to catch back up, as well as, set up a big turn for next turn as well. So we really, really do like Red and Ledger. And that's why we are running 3 Memorial Grounds and 3 Codex of Frailty, because if we can play 9 Red and Ledgers against the decks that it does the most damage against, then we can basically win that game and never let our opponent have a turn. And that's the goal. That's the key. Next up, we have Red and Ledger Light, which is Remorseless. Still good against the go wide aggro heroes here, as it does punish them for extra damage every time they do an action, or they play an action card, I should say. But it's obviously not as big as Red and Ledger. You still play it, and you still feel good shooting this arrow for sure. And it's a good, placeholder until you see your Red and Ledgers. So. Remorseless is a very good card to get going there. Alright, so those are our arrows. Let's get into the pumps to make our arrows bigger to, get damage through with our dominate ability. The first one is Laced with Blood Rot. Again, the Blood Rot token is super, super good. This is a 0 for 3, but obviously with the on hit becomes a 0 for 5. So very, very good pump. We like this Laced with Blood Rot. It's in a main board in every deck. The next one is Laced with Frailty. This is not main boarded. I have this as a sideboard option for the decks that it will deal the most damage against. Obviously, the first one to think about is Lexi. A Frailty token does quite a bit against Lexi. So, bringing this in and getting it on hit to give a Frailty is nice to reduce the damage that's coming your way. I also like this against ninjas, so Fais and Katsus, as it will prevent their Kodachis from being able to hit, and as well as the knives from Uzuri and Arachne, their knives having one less damage, which is basically no damage at that point. Laser Frailty, I'll bring this in against those type decks. Another sideboard pump that I like to have is Laced with Inertia. This is definitely for the heroes that the arsenal matters quite a bit, particularly wizards, especially Iyslander. Iyslander wants to have an arsenal like every turn, and this prevents that from happening, allows you to play a little bit more freer on the next turn since they won't have an arsenal, so that's very nice. So Laced with Inertia, very, very good for that. Can also be good against Rangers that look to have an arsenal to set up with, and this prevents that as well. So Laced with Inertia, a sideboard card against Wizards and Rangers for sure. Next up, we have a card that I main board in every deck, or against every hero, and that's Premeditate. Premeditate is just super good. It's a 0 for 3 pump, but it allows for an on-hit effect for any cards that come out of the arsenal, which for us will be all of our arrows. If we can get a multiple arrow turn, this still, has the on-hit ability for the next arrow as well. So it has the potential to have multiple on-hit abilities for however many arrows I'm shooting or how many cards I'm playing from the arsenal. And as well as that Ponder token just allows us to have an arsenal for the next turn. It allows us to exert our entire hand and feel okay, because if we get a hit, we get to have an arsenal for the next turn. Another card that I will main board against all heroes is Seek and Destroy. Seek and Destroy is super good. Again, it does disrupt the arsenal. It makes it where your opponent cannot have an arsenal or extra cards in hands. So giving the 0 for +3 and that ability is just super, super good. I keep it in against every hero because every hero does want to play their arsenal. Maybe some heroes can, it matters a little less, and that's why I'm not going to have this and Laced with Inertia in the main board. But this is just generally just very good, especially when we can come in with a dominated Red and Ledger. They can only do one action, and then once that one action's over, if we hit them with a Seek and Destroy with that Red and Ledger, then they have to discard the rest of their cards in their hand, as well as destroy their arsenal, which is pretty brutal, to be honest. Alright, next up, another pump that I have main board is Dead Eye. This is a 1 for 3, but it has an on hit that if they have a name counter, which is, we give hit with the Crow's Nest here, that when the arrow hits, we can choose a card from their hand and discard it. Obviously, that is an insane ability. Another great benefit of this card is that it is a yellow pitch, so it does allow us to pitch into it. as well as it blocks for 3. So this card it does cost 1, which is its downfall, but it does have an extra resource that we can pitch into and an extra block, and that's why we actually like this card, and that's why it's a main board card. On top of that, the extra ability to be able to pick a card from their hand to have them discard is super good. It's not the easiest one to get going because it does cost a resource to put an aim counter on, and then it costs a resource to play Deadeye, and then if it's a Red Ledger, Remorseless, or Infecting Shot, it'll cost another resource to shoot that arrow, which maybe sometimes you have all these resources. There is a good amount of blues within the deck, but sometimes you don't, and so sometimes you'll have to choose or do the math to see if this is possible with the aim counter or not, or if it just be a pump. Either way, very good card. Another very good card is Rain Razor. Again, this is another yellow pitch. This one, however, is just a 0 for 2, but it has all arrows for the turn get +2. This is very good when you get paired with a bolt and shot, or if you just use your Snapdragon Scalers to get multiple arrows being shot off. This is also very good for that. I was originally down on this card when I first started playing Azalea way back when, just because I didn't think 0 for 2 was good enough. But the more I play with this card, the more I realize that this is just a staple and it is needed. It's one of the only ways that we can attack with an arrow, they can fully block it, and then we can sneak damage to get the on-hit effect in, which is pretty damn important with Azalea. There's a lot of good on-hits. Okay, next up we have our sideboard cards that are just really meant for Dromai. That is one of our tougher matchups, and it's a very popular matchup. So we have the Battering Bolt here because it is a 6 power. We do like that. We are mostly using it for that. With the exception is I will bring this arrow in against Dorinthia. And the reason is because, especially if I can dominate this arrow, they reveal their hand and then they discard and lose life for each non-action card discarded this way. Dorinthia has a ton of attack reactions, right? That's kind of her thing, is attack reactions. So if this can get dominated and then they can block with 1 attack reaction, if they have 1 or 2 more in their hand, those are going to get discarded and they're going to lose additional life for it. So Battering Bolt, very good card against Dorinthia. Otherwise, a great popper for Dromai. And then next up is Raging Onslaught. Not an arrow, but it is a 6 power that pitches for 2, which can be pretty relevant. Maybe I don't need to use the popper right then and there. So maybe I would rather have the pitch instead and have this come back around. You will find that you actually go through your deck quite quick with Azalea. So even against a Dromai, you can pitch this and expect to see it later on. That's really all there is to this card. I mean, there's nothing else that really fits with it, as it is not an arrow. And that's the entirety of the Azalea deck. I'm quite happy with it. It's actually been a lot of fun testing with it. Definitely let you guys know how I do with it. But until then, keep on fabbing, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Do you like this shirt? Well, you can get them at fleshandbaubles.com. You can even use our promo code SNEEP for 15% off your entire order. They got shirts, they got keychains, and they got more to come. So check them out, fleshandbaubles.com.